What if the very things you believe will make an avoidant man feel closer to you are actually triggering the instinct that makes him step back? Think about that for a moment. You may be trying to create a stronger bond through emotional openness, affection, vulnerable conversations, and deeper intimacy, believing that eventually he will feel safe enough to remove the walls around his heart. But there may be something happening underneath his behavior that has nothing to do with whether he cares about you. His reactions can be shaped by his nervous system, his emotional conditioning, and experiences from his past that he may barely understand himself. For you, moving closer can feel like love. For him, that same closeness can activate an internal warning system. The more emotionally intense the connection becomes, the more his instinct may tell him to create distance. Inside him, that reaction can happen before he has even consciously decided to pull away. His thoughts become more guarded, his body becomes tense, and his nervous system begins preparing for something it perceives as emotionally threatening, even when you have done absolutely nothing wrong. You may experience intimacy as reassurance, while he may experience it as a demand he does not know how to handle. You may associate emotional closeness with peace, while he associates too much closeness with losing his independence or becoming trapped in expectations. Yet there is a powerful contradiction underneath all of this. An avoidant man can genuinely desire love while simultaneously feeling frightened by what love requires from him. He can want companionship, affection, acceptance, and emotional warmth, while also feeling an urge to escape when those things become too intense. This contradiction is exactly why his behavior can feel so confusing. One moment he may seem deeply connected, present, affectionate, and emotionally invested, and then suddenly he becomes distant, quiet, or difficult to reach. If you only look at his behavior from the outside, you may conclude that he has stopped caring or that his feelings were never real. But without understanding the internal pattern driving him, you can easily misread what is happening. Avoidant attachment often changes the way a person responds to closeness, vulnerability, and emotional dependence. That means the same interaction that makes you feel more secure can make him feel exposed. Once you understand the system operating beneath his reactions, his behavior becomes easier to interpret. You stop asking why he suddenly changed and begin recognizing what emotional closeness may be activating inside him. This is especially important when it comes to physical intimacy. Many women naturally assume that sex will create stronger emotional attachment, particularly when there is already a meaningful connection between two people. You may open yourself emotionally, share vulnerable moments, communicate your feelings, and believe that physical closeness will naturally deepen the bond between you. But an avoidant man may process that experience very differently. His nervous system does not necessarily interpret intimacy as proof that he should move closer. If emotional intensity feels threatening to him, even a beautiful, intimate experience can be followed by a need for space. That does not automatically mean he felt nothing. It can mean that the emotional intensity became difficult for him to regulate. Understanding that distinction can prevent you from interpreting every withdrawal as rejection and every period of silence as proof that the connection meant nothing. Imagine the difference between what happens inside you and what may happen inside him after a deeply intimate moment. You might feel calmer, more connected, emotionally reassured, and more attached because the experience confirms the bond you already feel. You may want more conversation, more affection, and more closeness afterward because intimacy has made you feel secure. But if he has a strong avoidant pattern, the same experience can leave him feeling emotionally overloaded. Instead of automatically moving toward greater connection, he may begin creating distance so he can regain a sense of control and emotional independence. This is why trying to convince him through more affection, more vulnerability, or greater emotional intensity can sometimes produce the exact opposite response you hoped for. You are attempting to strengthen the bond, while his nervous system may be attempting to reduce the intensity of that bond so he can feel regulated again. And this is where many women become caught in a painful cycle. When he pulls away, you naturally feel the need to restore the connection. You may send another message, explain your feelings more clearly, offer additional reassurance, or become even more emotionally available because you believe that showing him how much you care will help him feel safe. But from his perspective, The increased emotional pressure may make retreat feel even more necessary. Neither person is necessarily trying to hurt the other. You are seeking reassurance while he is seeking emotional space. You are moving toward the relationship to feel secure, while he is moving away from the relationship to recover that same sense of security. Once you recognize this pattern, you can begin to see why chasing harder rarely creates the lasting closeness you are hoping for. Sometimes understanding the pattern matters more than increasing the intensity. You might assume that incredible physical intimacy will eventually make an avoidant man trust you more, become emotionally vulnerable, and finally feel comfortable letting you into the deeper parts of his world. But that is not always how his experience works. For some avoidantly attached men, sex can remain largely connected to immediate pleasure, rather than automatically becoming a pathway toward emotional closeness. He may enjoy the experience intensely in the moment, just as he might enjoy a favorite meal, an exciting activity, or anything else that provides an immediate sense of pleasure. But enjoyment and emotional bonding are not necessarily the same thing. This does not mean he is incapable of caring about you or that his feelings are fake. It simply means that physical intimacy alone may not create the emotional security you are expecting it to create within him. There is another part of the bonding process that deserves much more attention because it can influence whether intimacy becomes emotionally meaningful or simply remains an enjoyable experience. When you understand how an avoidant man's nervous system responds to safety, trust, cooperation, and emotional closeness, you begin to see why certain experiences affect him differently. The goal is not to discover some secret trick that allows you to control his emotions or make him attached to you against his will. That approach only creates more pressure and ultimately damages trust. The real shift comes from understanding what helps his system associate closeness with safety rather than threat. When intimacy begins to feel emotionally secure instead of overwhelming, his response can gradually become different. Rather than automatically needing distance afterward, he may become more comfortable remaining emotionally present with you. This can change the way he experiences you inside the relationship. Instead of simply seeing you as someone connected to moments of physical pleasure, he can gradually begin associating you with emotional safety, trust, cooperation, and genuine companionship. You become someone he can relax around rather than someone he feels he has to protect himself from. He may begin experiencing you as a teammate, a person who understands him without trying to control him, someone who can stand beside him without demanding that he immediately reveal everything inside. That distinction matters enormously with avoidant attachment. A healthy bond is not created by forcing emotional disclosure or trying to make someone dependent on you. It develops when both people experience enough safety to remain present, communicate honestly, and build trust without feeling that their autonomy is being taken away. And that is exactly what we are going to explore here through Avoidant Connection. We are going deeper into why the usual assumptions about intimacy and emotional bonding do not always apply in the same way to an avoidantly attached man. We will look at the biological and psychological processes that can influence how he responds to closeness, why physical intimacy may sometimes be followed by emotional withdrawal, and what can help transform intimacy into something more emotionally connected. This is not about manipulation, psychological games, or finding a technique that guarantees a particular reaction from him. It is about developing a calmer and more accurate understanding of avoidant attachment. When you understand what his nervous system may be communicating through his behavior, you can stop treating every withdrawal as a mystery and start approaching the relationship with greater clarity, patience, and emotional intelligence. So if there is one thing I want you to take away from everything we have explored, let it be this. You cannot create genuine attachment in an avoidant man by trying harder to make him feel something. You cannot love someone into emotional readiness, and you cannot force a nervous system to experience closeness as safe simply because your intentions are loving. The deeper question is not how much you can give him, how perfectly you can behave, or how intensely you can make the relationship feel. The real question is whether the connection between you has enough safety, consistency, honesty, and freedom for both people to remain emotionally present. An avoidant man may have feelings for you and still struggle with intimacy. He may miss you and still need distance. He may care deeply and still become overwhelmed when the relationship starts feeling emotionally intense. And this is where understanding becomes more powerful than chasing. When an avoidant man pulls back, your first instinct may be to close the distance immediately. You may want an explanation, reassurance, a conversation, or some confirmation that everything between you is still okay. That reaction is completely understandable because uncertainty activates your own emotional system, but repeatedly pursuing someone who is already overwhelmed can unintentionally create more pressure. He retreats, you pursue, he retreats further, and you pursue even harder. Eventually, both people feel misunderstood. You feel rejected and emotionally abandoned, while he feels pressured and unable to breathe inside the relationship. The cycle then becomes the relationship itself. Breaking that cycle requires a different response. It requires learning how to remain connected without abandoning yourself, and learning how to give space without turning that space into emotional punishment. This is why physical intimacy should never be treated as a shortcut to emotional commitment. Sex can create pleasure, vulnerability, excitement, and even a powerful sense of connection, but it does not automatically resolve attachment wounds or eliminate someone's fear of dependence. If an avoidant man has learned throughout his life to protect himself through emotional distance, one intimate experience will not suddenly rewrite that pattern. What changes attachment patterns is usually repetition. It is repeated evidence that closeness does not mean losing yourself. Repeated experiences that disagreement does not automatically lead to rejection. Repeated moments where vulnerability is met with respect instead of criticism. Repeated proof that intimacy can exist alongside independence. Over time, those experiences can challenge the old belief that emotional closeness is dangerous. And this is where the idea of safety becomes so important. Safety does not mean constantly reassuring him, walking on eggshells, or carefully monitoring every word so that he never feels uncomfortable. That would not be a healthy relationship either. Emotional safety means both people can be themselves without being controlled, punished, humiliated, or manipulated. It means you can express your feelings without demanding that he immediately respond exactly the way you want. It means he can ask for space without using silence as a weapon. It means you can respect his autonomy while still respecting your own emotional needs. The goal is not to create a relationship where one person has to become smaller so the other person can stay comfortable. The goal is to create a relationship where closeness and individuality can exist at the same time. That distinction can completely change the way you interpret an avoidant man's behavior. If he becomes quiet after an emotionally intense experience, you do not automatically have to assume that the connection meant nothing. But you also should not automatically romanticize his withdrawal and tell yourself that every disappearance is evidence of hidden love. Both extremes can be damaging. Sometimes withdrawal is simply withdrawal. Sometimes someone is emotionally overwhelmed. Sometimes they genuinely need space. And sometimes they are simply unwilling or unable to provide the relationship you need. Understanding attachment psychology should help you see reality more clearly, not encourage you to explain away behavior that consistently hurts you. This is especially important because there is a temptation to turn avoidant psychology into a strategy manual. You start wondering which message will make him chase you, which behavior will make him miss you, how long you should stay silent, what kind of intimacy will make him attach, or what you can do to trigger his fear of losing you. But that approach keeps you focused on controlling his reaction instead of understanding the relationship. Real connection cannot be built through psychological tricks. If you constantly have to calculate your behavior to prevent someone from disappearing, you are not experiencing emotional security. You are managing instability, and eventually, that becomes exhausting. A healthier approach is to become curious about the pattern without becoming consumed by it. Notice what happens before he withdraws. Notice what happens after emotional closeness. Notice whether he eventually returns and communicates, or whether you are always the one repairing the connection. Notice whether he can gradually tolerate more vulnerability, or whether the same cycle continues indefinitely. Most importantly, notice how you feel inside the relationship. Do you feel respected? Do you feel emotionally considered? Can you express your needs? Can you ask for reassurance without being punished for having feelings? Can he communicate his boundaries without disappearing? These questions are often more important than trying to determine whether he secretly loves you, because someone can have genuine feelings for you and still be incapable of giving you a healthy relationship. That may be one of the hardest truths to accept. Love and emotional availability are not identical. Attraction and compatibility are not identical. Chemistry and commitment are not identical. A person can think about you constantly and still fail to communicate. They can miss you and still avoid you. They can feel deeply connected to you and still refuse to build the consistency required for a stable partnership. Their feelings may be real, but your needs are real too. You should never have to prove that you are worthy of being chosen by endlessly tolerating uncertainty. This is also why you should never use the idea of an avoidant nervous system to excuse disrespect. Attachment patterns can explain behavior, but explanation is not the same as justification. If someone repeatedly lies, manipulates, disappears without communication, keeps you emotionally available while refusing commitment, or repeatedly violates your boundaries, you do not have to accept it simply because you understand where their behavior might come from. Compassion does not require self-abandonment. You can understand someone's wounds and still say, "This relationship is not healthy for me." You can recognize why someone struggles with intimacy and still decide that you need a partner who is emotionally available. And perhaps the most powerful shift happens when you stop making his internal world the center of your entire emotional life. You do not need to spend every day analyzing his messages, studying his silence, interpreting his social media behavior, or trying to determine whether every small action represents hidden feelings. You deserve a life that continues moving forward regardless of whether he is close or distant. The more grounded you become in yourself, the less his withdrawal controls your emotional state. You stop reacting to every change in his behavior. You begin observing instead of chasing. You begin asking not only, "What does he feel?" but also, "What am I experiencing here, and is this enough for me?" That is where real emotional power comes from. Not from making an avoidant man afraid of losing you. Not from becoming unavailable so that he starts chasing. Not from withholding affection as a strategy. Your power comes from knowing that you can love someone without losing yourself inside their emotional limitations. You can give someone space without waiting indefinitely. You can be compassionate without becoming their therapist. You can understand their attachment pattern without allowing it to dictate your life. And you can walk away from an unhealthy dynamic without needing to prove that you were right about their feelings. If an avoidant man truly wants to build something with you, the relationship cannot depend entirely on your ability to make him comfortable. At some point, he has to participate. He has to become willing to communicate. He has to learn what happens inside him when closeness triggers fear. He has to take responsibility for the impact of his behavior. He has to understand that asking for space is healthy when communicated respectfully, but disappearing without explanation can damage trust. Growth requires participation from both people. You cannot do his emotional work for him, just as he cannot do yours for you. And when both people are willing to grow, intimacy can become something completely different. Instead of being a moment followed by anxiety, it can become part of a larger pattern of trust. Instead of physical closeness being followed by emotional confusion, there can be calm conversation, affection, and mutual understanding. Instead of one person chasing while the other retreats, both people can learn how to regulate themselves and communicate their needs. The relationship begins to feel less like a constant test and more like a partnership. That transformation does not happen because someone discovered a secret biological trick. It happens because two people repeatedly create experiences in which connection is associated with respect, safety, honesty, and choice. So if you are dealing with an avoidant man right now, do not ask yourself only, "How can I make him come closer?" Ask a deeper question. What kind of relationship are we actually creating together? That question changes everything, because you are not here simply to win someone's affection. You are here to experience love that can exist in reality, not only inside your imagination. You deserve someone who can appreciate your vulnerability without making you regret showing it. Someone who can enjoy closeness without treating it as a threat. Someone who can ask for space without making you feel abandoned. Someone who can come back to the conversation instead of leaving you alone with unanswered questions. And if that person is an avoidant man who is genuinely willing to grow, then understanding his attachment pattern can help you approach the relationship with greater compassion and patience. But if he consistently refuses to grow, your understanding should not become an excuse for staying trapped in the same painful cycle. There is a difference between giving someone room to heal and waiting forever for someone to become ready. There is a difference between patience and self-neglect. There is a difference between loving someone and trying to rescue them from themselves. So let intimacy become less about trying to produce a reaction in him and more about discovering whether the two of you can create genuine emotional safety together. Let closeness be something freely chosen, not something strategically engineered. Let communication replace guessing. Let consistency become more important than intensity. Let actions matter more than potential. And above all, let your own emotional well-being remain part of the equation. Because the deepest form of connection is not the moment when an avoidant man finally becomes obsessed with you because you found the perfect way to trigger his attachment system. The deeper victory is something much healthier. It is reaching a place where neither person has to chase, manipulate, perform, or disappear to feel safe. It is being able to say, I care about you, and I also care about myself. It is allowing love to grow without forcing it. It is understanding that closeness should not require the loss of freedom, and independence should not require the loss of intimacy. And if this entire journey has taught you anything, I hope it is this. You do not need to become less emotional, less loving, less expressive, or less yourself, just because someone struggles with closeness. Your sensitivity is not the problem. Your desire for connection is not the problem. Your need for consistency is not too much. The right relationship will not require you to constantly silence your needs in order to keep another person from running away. At the same time, healthy love asks you to develop your own emotional security. Do not let another person's distance determine your worth. Do not measure your value by how quickly someone responds to you. Do not interpret someone's inability to receive love as evidence that you are difficult to love. Their emotional limitations belong to them. Your responsibility is to remain honest about what you need, what you can offer, and what you are willing to accept. That is the real lesson behind avoidant attachment. It is not about learning how to control an avoidant man. It is about learning how attachment works so you can stop confusing intensity with intimacy, distance with mystery, and potential with partnership. Once you understand that, you become much harder to manipulate, not only by another person, but by your own hope. You begin choosing relationships based on what is actually happening rather than what you believe might happen someday. So whether this relationship eventually becomes deeper, or whether it teaches you that you need something different, let the experience make you wiser rather than smaller. Let it teach you to recognize emotional patterns without becoming trapped inside them. Let it teach you that love should feel challenging sometimes, but it should not constantly feel like emotional survival. And remember this final truth. Someone else's fear of intimacy does not diminish your capacity to be loved. Their hesitation does not make you unworthy. Their silence does not define your value. Their distance does not determine your future. You can understand them and still choose yourself. You can love them and still maintain your boundaries. You can hope for their growth while refusing to put your life on hold waiting for it. Real connection is not created when one person finally learns how to make the other person stay. It is created when two people become willing to meet each other honestly, consistently, and freely. That is the kind of intimacy worth building. Not intimacy based on fear, pressure, or psychological games, but intimacy rooted in trust, respect, emotional responsibility, and genuine choice. And that is what I want you to remember from avoidant connection. You are not here to convince someone to love you. You are here to discover whether the love between you can become safe, mutual, consistent, and real. If it can, allow it to grow naturally. If it cannot, have the courage to recognize that too. Because sometimes the greatest form of self-respect is not figuring out how to make someone come closer. Sometimes it is realizing that you deserve a love that does not require you to spend your entire life standing at the door, hoping someone will finally decide to walk through it.